Welcome to Thrive, where I believe you were not created to survive, but to thrive. And if you change yourself, you can change your world. Welcome to another episode. I'm so excited today to have in the building somebody I've known for a very, very long time. Always admired him, looked after what he's done, followed him, and I appreciate him so much. In the building this morning, we have Pastor Rich Romero. Come on,
man.
Welcome to Thrive.
Fired up to be here, bro.
Thank you, man.
I love you. Love this. What a moment we're in, man.
This is wild, man. I appreciate you being here. I love you. And I start, when I have guests, I always start by just giving some honor.
Yeah.
Or, our culture calls it giving flowers. And so I want to honor you, man, for a moment because I know I told you a little bit off camera, but I admire you. You've been a guy you've always carried yourself with so much dignity, respect. You really, truly love God. You fear the Lord. Growing up, both of us grew up basically around the same circles. We went to different churches, but we all knew. Growing up in Miami, a lot of people who just do church, but really never walk this thing out for real. Yeah. And everybody that I know that knows you, and if your name comes up in the conversation, they're like, Rich is the real deal. He's the real deal. And I know that to be true. So I want to honor that.
Thank you, man.
I honor you, everything that you've done, planting Generation Church in our city. I love that we're doing this together in the city. So I love you, man. Thank you for being on Thrive.
Man, I'm honored to be here. And I love you, man. Honestly, I've always told you this. We spoke a little bit off camera now, but just to have a friendship with you and to see you, offline, to see you off platform. You're the same person. On platform, you're the same person in these environments, off of these environments. And man, you're as real as it gets, and to be able to see two homegrown kids,
wow.
You know what I mean? Grown so much, mature so much, and now be pioneering in our city.
Yeah, wow.
It's pretty surreal, and
really
so
is.
I'm happy to be here, man.
Thank you, man. I love you. I appreciate you. I was thinking about we just talked about it a little bit, but when I first met you, it was our friend Pablo that introduced us. So you knew Pablo because Pablo would go to where you were there on staff and helping out, or the church that you were a part of. But we were maybe, 19, 20?
Yeah, we were in our late teens. I mean, it really was just a moment in our city where Christian hip hop was taking off.
Yes.
And I was just in these circles or these environments, and Pablo would be performing, and you'd kind of were doing your thing too. And we just had mutual friends together. And that was an era, man. Youth church and youth Christian rappers.
Bro,
and
both of our churches at that time had exploding youth ministries. Pablo was the Spiritual Lyrical? I forgot the name of his group, but then he did his solo thing with Macho. He was doing it with Macho.
So I found him when he was solo already.
Solo?
Yeah, with the T.I. hat up to the side. And
Pablo's going to listen to this and be man. Pablo was doing his thing with Macho, then went solo. And it was probably Pablo. He did his thing in our city. And then me and Jason started doing Mainstay. And we did an Alpha retreat once.
Yes.
I forgot.
Yeah.
But we went and did a few songs there. And this is when I was trying to be a hip hop artist, and I cannot rap for nothing. So after about a year and a half, I'm like, I love God. I want to do ministry. But
what's funny about Mainstay, one of my guys, Gabe, who used to be known as Dunamis, was his rap name.
Yes.
He's got this collection of just hip hop CDs. And we were looking through it, and I saw your album, bro. It is still there. It is in the vault. And so if Thrive ever needs extra content,
dude,
I would love to bring that out the vault, man.
I can't believe you saw it. I think I don't even have a copy.
Yeah, he has that copy, man.
Wow, bro. Absolutely. I got to talk to Gabe.
It was hilarious.
Yes. So me and Gabe go way back. I remember him being... He did a little bit of hip hop, but then he started singing. He is phenomenal. I know he's doing worship at your church.
I mean, listen, he's on our staff. Wow. He's incredible, but he is one of the most anointed worship leaders I've ever seen.
No, he's so gifted.
Outside of who he is as an individual, him and his wife Kiki are incredible. But awesome. His story is amazing. But yes, I know you obviously go way back with him too.
Yeah, I remember him doing hip hop, all that with us, in the same groups, and we all did these little concerts all over the city and stuff like that. Wow, I remember Gabe as a young guy. That is crazy. Yeah, I gotta see the physical copy. I haven't seen it in years.
We'll get that.
But all those youth groups were doing amazing. Mm-hmm. I remember the churches that we were at there. I mean, youth, young adults blowing up. So I see you, doing your thing at your church, and Pablo introduces us. And since then, we became friends, and I've seen you from a distance, all that you've done. To see where you are today, it's been wild, bro. God is so good. But you've always maintained. You've been focused, and You also just don't care what anybody else is doing. You're going to serve God. You're going to love God. You're going to love your family. You and your wife, Tina, who's phenomenal. You're going to love Tina. Now you got 3 girls.
3 girls,
and
man.
to see you always be focused and just be like, this is what I'm going to do. That's why I wanted to have you on the podcast and just be like, man, I love that about you, dude. You're one of these dudes that just like, I'm focused. This is who I am. And you play no games, at least when it comes to your convictions. And you're a good hang too. Like, you know, I love it,
Thank
man.
you, man.
So I love your journey, man, and where you've been. Let's talk a little bit about your journey. So you got saved high school?
Yeah, so I started attending this church, a prominent Hispanic church here in our city when I was around 12 years old. My parents had gotten divorced. My mom really just dedicated her life to the Lord. My sister started going to this youth group. And so whenever I was with my mom, I would just attend. But it was one of those things like, hey, your sister's going, you're going too. Yeah. But it was at the age of 14 that I gave my life to Jesus at that same church in a 7 p.m. Spanish only, average age of 70.
Wow.
I gave my life to the Lord. My mom was on that. My mom was leading worships like, Rich, come out. And I went, and at 14, I gave my life to Jesus and kind of still trying to figure it out. But at 16, I remember that moment, that sophomore, junior year of high school, where it's like, I'm all in. Wow. And this is what it is. I mean, I was playing baseball at the time, and it's what I wanted to do, figure out college. But this, I mean, ministry, the Lord, serving the city. And it was all in. So 16 years old, yeah.
Wow, man. Yeah, kind of same thing. I grew up in church. I was 8 years old when I remember just hearing the gospel. And I don't know what it was, but I told my mom, I want to raise my hand. Like, I believe this. I want Jesus to be my Lord and Savior. And then same thing as you. Just we're all in. And we're just like, I don't know. I mean, no church is perfect. And we come from different churches here in Miami and all over the world. Every church has its imperfections. Not our churches today are not perfect churches,
right.
But we just wanted to serve God, love God, and we had a blast doing it. I feel like we lived, like you said, through an era that was absolutely so much fun, pure,
what a privilege.
Loving God, loving our city. Yes, you guys used to do some phenomenal conferences. We did some conferences as well, and so visiting, I would go to your conferences all the time that your church was doing. Were amazing. My church as well. And so Miami had a time there where it was like, man, this is so much fun.
Yeah.
And hopefully we get to do that now. And we're leading it, which is absolutely wild. But it's like, no, man, God can move in this city. And I tell people all the time, it's like, Miami's a hard city. You guys are crazy leading church at Miami. It's like, it's the city we were born and raised in, and God could do it anywhere.
Absolutely.
I've seen it here. We've seen it.
Yep.
Why not do it again? Yeah. And I think we're experiencing it now in your church, my church, on all the amazing churches in Miami. God's doing something in our city.
Absolutely, 100%, man. And being born and raised here, it was interesting. We'll talk a little bit now about this story of the church itself and how it got planted. But there was a moment there as to, Lord, where are you calling us? You know, where are we going to plant this church? Yeah. You know, when we finally got to that place. And that only lasted for a few weeks, man.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like we knew, like this is, I'm not parachuting anywhere. Like we're staying here. Yeah. The harvest is plentiful here. What a beautiful place to do ministry. Yeah, it's hard, but every pastor will tell you they have the hardest city.
Absolutely.
You know, every city has its challenges. Every city, you know, has its things you got to figure out. But I'm so thankful that I'm here. I'm so thankful that I can raise my kids here.
That's right.
And I'm so thankful to be able to be making an impact in the city that I love.
Yeah, I think we both think the same, but it's the best city in the world.
I agree, man. I agree.
And I know we're biased. We're born and raised here, but man, I'll talk to people all over the world and they're like, you get to live in Miami. And you know, because sometimes when you live here, you get tired of it or whatever, but it's like, I've always had like eyes that I love this city. I'm like, man, I know the traffic, I know people, all that, but it's like, there's never been a time when I don't love my city.
For sure. I mean, I moved away for 2 years when I was in Bible college. I lived in Columbus, Ohio. And when you're at that age, it's like, man, I can't wait to leave Miami. It's all you know.
Yeah.
Man, you get away from it for a little bit, and you're like, man, I can't wait to get back.
I can't wait to get back.
I don't ever want anything else but this. Yeah. And there's a beautiful pull that the city has, man, and it's getting better every year.
Yeah, I really do believe it. Our city, the next 2 decades, this city's going to look different. It's going to be amazing. But me and Anna and a few of us went to a conference one time to another city, and we were just looking for coffee in the morning. You know, it's like to have la ventanitas that we have. And it's like, we're blessed. Like, man, you can't find that nowhere. I have a friend who moved away, and that's one of the things he misses the most. Yeah. Like, I can't get that coffee nowhere. Yeah. It's like, nah, man, you got to come back to Miami.
Absolutely.
But let's talk a little bit. You get involved in church. You get saved. You get involved immediately. Yeah. And you guys have this phenomenal youth group. What'd you start doing to start helping out?
Yeah, so I was 16 years old, and we had a thriving youth church on Friday nights. Yeah. And so that was it. So I was there every Friday. I was just serving, preaching, hosting a small group in my house. getting my entire high school to come out and be a part of what we were building and doing. And then from there, it was like, okay, what else? What else can we do? And so that was in that junior year of high school. I turned 18, getting ready for senior year, and it was evident there that I just felt a call towards ministry.
How'd you feel that call?
And
What'd you sense? Because that's one of the questions I think we get asked a lot.
It was, I don't know if it was ever like a specific moment where it was like, okay, this is like, man, it's clarity and it's ministry. I think it was progressive. But I just remember saying, man, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And I knew I had a gift on me. So I was getting opportunities to preach and share the gospel.
At 18?
Yeah, well, 17 at that age. I remember some of my buddies and I, we had a chapel, it sits about maybe 400. And we kind of, first opportunity ever by our youth and young adult pastor to lead a service and launch a series on a Friday night.
Wow.
We were 16, 17. It was a group of us, hungry kids. And I preached for the first time after preaching for about a year in this small group that I had. And it was one of those moments where like, okay, I know that God's anointed me to do this, lives were changed, people giving their hearts to Jesus. And then I continued to move in that gift. Yeah. And I was like, okay, God, so I have this gift. Is it from you? How can I honor you with it?
Very good.
And then how can I continue to serve you through everything you've given me? Yeah. So I think that was like the first moment where I was like, can I pastor?
Wow.
Can I be a preacher? You know what I mean? I'd seen these guys on TV. I'd seen them coming in through the church that I was privileged to be a part of, and these monster ministries. And then here I am, right? A little Cuban kid with no pedigree at all. I mean, I'm the first Christian anything in my family. I grew up Catholic, and so it was at that moment, at that 17-year-old mark, where I said, okay, how can I pursue this? And in that pursuit of this gift, preaching, sharing the gospel, I fell in love with the scriptures. That I knew that at 18, I was going to put baseball away and I was going to devote my life. And it was there where I was just exploring Bible college, learning, getting trained. Where can I go? What can I do? And so that's really where it began.
I like the way you painted that picture, because that's so true. In the years that we were growing up, that 16, 17, 18 years of age, TBN was really, the place that we could see all these preachers. Yeah. But it's so true. It's like, man, we come from Hispanic homes. You're Cuban, my parents Costa Rican. It's like, if I even wanted to share the gospel, how do I do it? These guys are like, all come from like a lineage of spiritual legacy. Their families, their great-grandparents are pastors, and you see them leading these incredible programs and have massive churches on TBN. So it's like late 1990s, and I'm like, never. So what am I going to do? I don't know how do you even begin? And then we're part of these pretty large Hispanic churches down here in South Florida. And we just start getting involved. And it's just like, man, you need me to hold the door? I'll hold the door.
And that's it.
I don't care.
I was just happy to be in the room, And so I met my wife in youth church. She grew up in church. She went to Christian school. And even now that we're raising our daughters, they're in Christian school and they're in kids church. And they learn all these nursery songs. They learn all these, I don't know any of those songs. And we'll be dancing at, VBS, and I'm doing it with them. And my wife's like, honey, you don't know this song?
She's like, I have no clue.
I'm like, maybe I didn't grow up in church like you. I'm learning these things now, but it's an interesting thought.
Okay, that's right, because you came in later on, 12, 13.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought that, hey, I don't have this church background, family, generational faith that I'm really excited to pioneer now, right? With Tina, my wife Tina, with our children. But it is interesting to think about that, right?
Absolutely. So at 18, is that when you decided I'm going to Bible college?
Yeah. So I had a little part-time job at the church, and I decided to go to Bible college. I used my Florida prepaid to go to Columbus, Ohio. When you take that money out of Florida, then you've got peanuts. So I used that, sold my car, sold whatever I could, and worked for another 6 months. And then, I went to Bible college.
Literally, I'm just going to Bible college. I'm going to go live up there.
So funny enough, I had a buddy who was a part of my church, had one semester in already. And he was just, raving about his experience. And there was a youth pastor that was coming into our camps that had become the youth pastor there. And so I'm following his ministry naturally. I see him become the youth pastor there. See my buddy going there. I'm like, man, I need to go there. That's the only place I can afford, but I got to go there.
Wow.
One of their, they use eldership over there, that the model elder, Ronnie Harrison, comes to Miami. He was a prominent elder in the college there, in the church there, comes to Miami. We're having a Thursday night service before going to youth camp. This is my last youth camp with the church. Okay. And in the Thursday night service, my parents are there. The church is full. He calls me out of a 300-400 person crowd to the altar. Said, I'm going to pay for the first year of your school.
What?
Now, he was of that school, so he can do those things.
Yeah,
but what a moment to say, hey, we're already sensing this is a potential opportunity
That
for me
is
to
wild.
go. My parents are like, all right, we're going to figure it out financially. Let's just believe God for it. Let's go to this camp. We'll come back, reflect. You're going to graduate now. And Pastor Harrison, who
Wow.
planted a church now, I love him, still a friend of his, said, if you decide to go, I'm going to cover your first year's tuition.
That is wild.
And that's how it happened. So the first year I had it paid to go, and I did 2 years there, and it was incredible.
That is all. You know, I want to talk really quick before we continue to talk about your story in college. As much as people want to talk about church hurt, and we grew up in pretty wild ministries,
Sure.
fast paced. I mean, we got stories for days, and we talked
Absolutely.
about some of them. And yeah, like, you know, where it's mega churches down here that were doing all kind of stuff. We can complain about church hurt, but what I do love is that somehow God uses everything, right? And so like I remember both of our churches would always have these guests that would come in.
Yep.
And so you sharing that story is reminding me of like, man, I can pick apart and complain about a million things that I saw or experienced at 16, 17, 18.
Yep.
And I know we had the same experience basically, but it's like, there were so many God moments that were also like, I'm glad I was a part of that for that time. And in due time, at the right time, I had to move on for, you know, all the unbiblical things that were happening.
Sure. But
God was still in it. And that's God's grace. But it's like, man, some of these special guests that would come in, or prophets. I remember when there was a prophet in town.
Oh,
it was like you couldn't miss that service.
Yeah.
You were there that night. It's like prophet so-and-so is in town and everybody's getting a word. But those things like mark your life. Like that moment. What a moment.
My goodness. Absolutely. And you know, sometimes people that, you know, were from those days that maybe are in different paths right now, oftentimes like, man, I wish I wouldn't have gone that way, or I wish it would have been a different way. And I look at my life and I'm like, I have no regrets
That's right.
of any of it, of where I met the Lord, where I served the Lord, where I went to school.
Yep.
And that's a whole different dynamic of an environment and a place, but I have no regrets because the way I look at it, it's moments with the Lord.
Yes.
His presence was evident. My life was marked. I
Yes.
still remember moments crying right at a youth camp in the middle of Florida where my life was changed. And then I also just think about the relationships that I've made through every place that God has allowed me to walk
Beautiful.
through. Even in my Bible college, like the truth is I probably wouldn't recommend this college today to people that are in pursuit, right? But I have no regrets because of the relationships that I made, what I learned along the way. And I think God uses all of that if you have that level of perspective.
Yes,
you know
absolutely. What I mean? You just said it spot on. Same thing here. It's funny because I say this story all the time. I remember being about 17, 18 years old. I went to a youth camp, young adult camp, and there was this one night. I mean, it's just a beautiful, powerful night. And by myself, respective of the ministries or what was going on that we can all complain about. It's like, I had this moment with God and I'm on the floor crying my eyes out. And I just literally, I'm telling God over and over with snot, boogers on the floor, all that.
Come on.
I'm serving you the rest of my life. My life is yours, over and over. I probably was on the floor for like a good hour. And I always tell people that was a moment that marked my life. I got up a different person.
Wow.
I got up a different young man. And I'm like, I'm serving God. I don't care about nothing. Like Paul says, you know, everything else I consider a lot. Like literally that's how I got up. Like I have all these thoughts and ideas of what I wanted to do with life. And I got up from there saying, okay, all that's cool. But if I don't do any of that, but I serve God, I'm good with it.
That's right.
So it's like, when I hear these church hurt stories, I'm like, man, I got church hurt stories for days that I probably will never share publicly, but they also made us better leaders at the end of the day.
100%.
They made us better leaders. It's like, man, I learned so much about leadership. I learned so much about organizations, about how to move in different rooms, you know, emotional IQ, all that kind of stuff that it's like, I can complain about it or I can say, God, you use all that.
And he does. He does. It galvanizes who we are today. And I think even you learn also what not to do.
Exactly.
You know, and when now that you're moving into ministry and you're leading something, you can see, okay, hey, I know I don't want to build it this way. I want to build it this way. So you need all of those experiences.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And we're learning and we're maturing and we're still going to change things next year
100%.
and 5 years from now because we're always maturing. I think we're always on this track to grow, but it takes all of these experiences, it takes all of these moments, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And church hurt is a real thing. I never want to minimize, and there's levels to that, even in that statement. even in recent news that we're seeing today, like the abuse levels that these things can get to.
Yeah.
But in the end, we can heal from all of that.
Absolutely.
We can heal, we can grow, we can mature, we can process in a healthy way that is still honoring.
Yep,
you
absolutely.
know, and that was, you know, speaking about the church now, and I think we can just even segment to this moment. I remember when we felt the call of God to plant a church. It was in 2015. So we're on staff at a church, and we're serving God, living life, and it's just awesome. And we feel this new assignment. At the time, we didn't really know it was a church. I never had a desire to say, hey, I'm going to be a lead pastor. Yeah. I mean, I loved
you
youth
were just
church.
all in.
I was all in, but I loved youth church. I loved sports. I was making impacts in our city with different things that we were doing in the sports youth world. And when we heard the Lord, we were in New York, my wife and I. It was in the fall of 2015, and we were attending a conference out there. And I just felt it in a moment as to a prompting, a nudging of the Holy Spirit as a new assignment. And so I held on to that. And I spoke to Tina that night. I held it for about maybe a couple weeks. We spoke about it. We had this big youth conference we were putting on that next February of 2016. And we agreed, hey, let's get through this conference. When this conference is done, we'll revisit this nudging, this moment, this conversation we're having about planning a church, because Tina wanted nothing to do with it.
She's like, I'm good.
I mean, listen, you know, you see a lot of dysfunction.
Yeah,
you see a lot of broken families. You see a lot of unhealthy rhythms. And we didn't have kids yet, but we were married, and it was like, I just don't want that. She grew up in the church. You know what I mean? She's seen a lot more than I had seen.
Yep.
And I said, all right, let's just put it in the back burner. We go through this conference. We spend all of 2016 just processing with God, bringing in different mentors and pastoral voices in our lives to affirm this is a God thing and not an us thing. Sure enough, we go through all of 2016, and it's confirmed that year we get together with this organization called the ARC, which is the Association of Related Churches.
Phenomenal.
And that was January of 2017. So we're getting coached, trained, partially funded. Like we're running, we're transitioning from that staff throughout that time. So about 2.5 years of a process. Yeah. But in that transition moment, there was a lot of things too that were not ideal, were curveballed, were unexpected, tough moments, you know. And I remember processing this with my pastor and different people in my life. And the question was, Rich, if you plant a church out of spite, that's the church you're going to reap.
That is so good.
And I didn't want to plant a church.
That works in every area.
Oh my gosh. I didn't want to plant a church out of spite, out of bitterness. Let me prove to you how good I can do it. Out of any selfish motive. Like if this was not a God thing, then I don't want any of it.
I'm done.
But I had to wrestle with that. I had to wrestle with those motives, those desires. I remember my pastor gave me a book called The Tale of Three Kings by Gene Edwards. A small book. One-day read.
I recommend that book to everybody.
I give it to everybody. I just have boxes of them, right?
That is so good.
And it's on the study of brokenness. And it was on pretty much the idea of all the spears that were thrown towards David by Saul. David never picked up a spear and threw it back.
That's right.
And it helped my healing so much from all the hurt and the troubles and the things in order to what God was doing in me, that it was going to be the healthiest it possibly could be.
That's right.
And so back to this conversation of church hurt, you've got to make a decision to heal from that, right? Even offenses. Let's say you're not in ministry and you're listening to this podcast today, right? Even the offense that you go through at your workplace with a friend, with a relative, whatever it may be, offense is a moment. Offended is a choice. Right? So you can choose to live offended, or you can choose to release it and walk free and walk healthy. And I think that applies to all levels, in ministry, in the world, in your career, whatever it may be. And I had to make that decision early on.
Yeah, I think, there's like you just said, there's levels of church hurt, and there may be times where you need to be like, okay, I'm not going to be a part of this organization anymore, this church anymore, and you move on and you try to find the healthiest one you can, for sure. But there are some stuff that if you're not careful, you will trap yourself in for years, and we both experienced that. Yep. And just trying to navigate through that, and after some time had to make some decisions as well. But I love your planting story. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience in planting? It seems like a dream, right? Like everybody's like, oh, bro, this is awesome. I'm going to start a church. It's going to go phenomenal. We're going to blow this thing up. We're going to go global, all of that. But it is a lot of pain, a lot of prayer, a lot of tears. There's young people out there maybe are thinking about being involved in ministry, maybe one day planting. Can you tell us a little bit about planting a church and all that comes with it?
Absolutely. I love the local church. I'm a local church guy all the way, and not just a church that I pastor and planted. I mean, I just love the local church. But I think too, when we planted, so we planted in 2018. So a little bit about that story. We get together with the Ark. I learned about them through my pastor who planted in 2011 in Oklahoma City. And that was the first moment that I ever saw healthy ministry.
Who's that?
So he's Pastor Josh Cossey in Oklahoma City. So he was youth pastoring at the college that I went to. From there, gets together with the Ark, plants a church. And before that, I had never seen healthy church.
Wow.
I'm talking about just healthy church government, healthy church culture. Like, what? That's possible. Yep. And so now I'm hearing the Lord speak to us to start a church. And we'd say, we don't want anything to do with that. That's not us. Lord, you've missed it. You know, it cannot, we just don't want anything, because all we've been modeled prior to that was a lot of dysfunction and a lot of, you know, toxicity. And so seeing it done healthy, it was like a light bulb went off. Like, wow, this is possible.
It is possible, yeah.
It is possible. And so, you know, we spent a whole year on just pursuing of a dream. And we were living on faith. We mortgaged our house and prepared to live on faith. You know, my wife was a school teacher at the time. Funny enough, we couldn't get pregnant for 2.5 years. And when we say yes to plant the church,
there
transition
comes
off
baby
to staff, baby number one, we get pregnant. So that whole year of transition, we're transitioning off staff. Tina's a school teacher. I have 3 jobs. I'm an Uber driver. I'm working in Hialeah at a warehouse packing rafts for airplanes at 5 a.m.
No way.
Till 2 p.m. And then from 3 p.m. on, delivering packages and then working on the church plant stuff in the evening. That's how we were living, because we had this little bit of money saved up.
Bro, you need to talk about that, because Instagram will not show you.
And that'll never make it to Instagram. Nobody knows that, you know?
Like, and again, leadership, this is not just to start a church, but to start a business. To start anything, to start a family. It's like, that's why I look at, people like our parents, and it's like, shout out to them. Like I remember my parents talk about working 3 jobs, stuff like that. And it's like, man, you gotta put in hard work where nobody's watching, and none of that stuff will make highlight reels, none of that. It's like, we're gonna plant a church, we're gonna work hard, we're gonna go all in, we feel the call of God, but you don't see what comes behind all that. It's a whole lot of tears, a whole lot of hard work, sweat. Wow. It was wild, and so it was all of 2017, literally all of it. We transitioned off in February, March, and we didn't plant the church till January of the next year. We're pregnant. Tina's making, a decent salary as a teacher. And so we have this little money that we just took out an equity out of our house. And so I remember going to the training in Church of the Highlands. That's where we got trained through the Ark. And I told Tina before we get on this flight, I said, honey, we had $60,000. Out of this $60,000, we're going to give $10,000 as the first seed to the church. We had just opened the bank account, like we're doing this, and we're like, all right, honey, we're doing 10,000. Amazing. You're in that room for 3 days, and you're hearing all these crazy stories. Chris Hodges talking about, no stone unturned. Yeah. And I feel in my second day of training to give it all, 60,000, give it all. And I'm like, how am I going to tell my pregnant wife that I'm going to give our life savings? I've never had any amount of money like this to give it all. And I said, Lord, if this is you, you better give me another sign. I'm talking Mufasa, open the clouds. I need to hear you. Because I've got this $10,000 check that I'm just going to give to the church, and that's just going to be the initial seed, And sure enough, man, we were catching an Uber day 3 back to the airport from Birmingham to Miami. And I don't hear the Lord. I haven't heard the Lord. I've been sweating. I've been like just in this training, but freaking out about what God's asking me to Lord,
do.
I think that was not you.
And sure enough, man, there's this giant warehouse right next to the Birmingham airport, still today. And it had the biggest poster billboard you can ever see. And it says in giant numbers, 50,000 available. Now it's talking about square feet.
Yeah.
And I still have that picture on my phone today. I see it every time I go to that airport. But it was the largest 50,000. And that was the exact dollar amount after we had, And that was, for me, that was my sign. I don't care if it was square footage for a warehouse. It was my number.
Yeah.
I get on the airplane with Tina. I'm sweating cold sweats. She's pregnant. We're on the way back to Miami. The dream couldn't be any bigger. I turn to her and say, hey, honey, I feel the Lord just really confirmed throughout these last 3 days to give everything we have to start Generation Church. And she looks back to me and said, of course, let's go. And that was the easiest, most life-giving combo. Like this weight came off me, and we came back, gave all the money we had, all the money. And there was no cash reserves to sit back on to say, okay, well, if it's tight this month, we're working Uber, working at this work, doing it all. And the Lord provided through and through.
Come on,
but it was an initial seed that we said, we're going all in. And I think God honors that. I know God has 100%. Honored that, and that year was just a year of miracles. Yeah, our baby girl comes in October. We're planting that January, but we fundraised over $200,000.
Come on.
built a team of over 100 people, and
Wow.
launched January 21st, 2018 in a middle school. I say all that to say I had to wrestle with a lot of things that year because, yes, it was painful, tears, crazy work rhythms, but there was also a thing happening where church planting started getting sexy throughout that time.
I remember.
And I was like, is that happening to me?
Wow.
Or is like, this is just the next thing to do?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Is this what I guess I have to do?
Yeah.
And I still had time to back away. I'm like, man, if this is not from you, Lord, and you're not calling us, then we don't want it. You know, this has to be a calling on your life.
That's right.
It can't be you're a good communicator.
That's right.
It can't be you're gifted. It can't be you know a lot of people. You want to do something new.
You want this, want that. Yeah.
And it's never going to look a certain way. It has to be from God. And you have to be willing to confront that.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to wrestle with your deepest desires
Love that.
and make it as robust of a practice as you can have in your daily relationship with the Lord to make sure that you're in His will and you're not just out of a fleshly good place, I think,
That's right.
to do something for God.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Bro, what a story. Thank you for sharing that. Ooh, I love that story, bro.
Yeah.
Like we're giving it all.
In. I just didn't want to get to a place where, like, you can only, I mean, for us, I guess, right? You can only plant a church one time. At least that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
You have one launch Sunday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't want to have regret after that weekend to be like, man, I wish I
would have done.
I would have done this, or I would have gone more. And no, man, if it's either faith or it's not.
That's right.
And faith is not safe. You know, I'm like, we're all in, you know?
Bro, we've been talking about this because I was talking to a friend of mine, now become a mentor, pastor of my life. I love him, Pastor David Campbell.
Yeah.
And we talk about walking by faith. It's so much easier said than done. And he shared with me his story. Several years ago, he decides to step away from being lead pastor. He believes it's time to transition, pastor the church for over 30 years in Canada. What am I going to do next? He's like, I'm going to live by faith, and God's going to open opportunities. I think a year later, Theos University opens with Nathan. Nathan asked him to be a professor. And him being a professor at Theos has opened up so many doors that now not 1 month goes by where they don't have provision. And it's like, man, he's living by faith. Where's your next? I don't know where I'm getting my next income, but God says He's going to take care of me.
And that's it.
And that's walking by faith. Like, he shared with me that story, and I'm like, I have no faith. I need that kind of faith. And what you guys did is just so commendable. It's admirable. And so you plant 2017.
So we plant 2018.
January
2018.
2 years later.
Yeah.
It's COVID.
Yeah. Well,
so that's a whole nother.
I mean, so that's what you don't get training for that. You know what I mean? Like, nobody trains you to pastor through a pandemic, you know. But again, it's that faith thing. I remember that first Sunday, like, I think we had like $700 left over. Like you know, you fundraise over $200,000. That's a lot of equipment, different things. But like, we had $700 in the bank. Like, we don't know if after this Sunday, who's even going to show up, right?
Yeah.
And but the Lord uses all of that.
Yes.
Right. And all of it is, a lot of it is just testing. Like, okay, what He's going to put new things in your hands. Can you be trusted with it? And so that story of the plants and the first year, year 2 comes COVID, and it's a whole nother faith challenge, right? Yeah. But yet again, the Lord came through and provided. I mean, I remember those days. We're still in a middle school today, but we were in a middle school for those 2 years. Miami, I love our city, a beautiful purple colored city, you know. It was in Texas, you know, and it wasn't the Bible Belt. And so we were shut down for a long time. And I still think about that weekend that we had to shut down. So by the grace of God, we had this office space in South Miami, not too far from our middle school. And we had just gotten in October of 2019. And so now we had a permanent spot, and we just turned it into,
it's crazy how everything
incredible,
worked
just
out.
a providence of God. We turned it into a studio.
Yeah.
Brought every light that we owned, every microphone we had, and
but can I say, you guys absolutely crushed it. I remember during that whole season, beginning of 2020, as we went into the pandemic, seeing you guys pivot and all that you guys started doing. I knew you guys were a fairly young church.
Right.
But bro, again, you guys just absolutely crushed it.
Thank you.
And it was awesome. Crazy how you got that warehouse. You started
right.
filming.
It was just amazing, man. Yeah. And thank you for in that era. You were always a constant supporter. Everything you had, you would always offer it. Rich, what do you need? You got to come film here, do something here, whatever. And so, man, I never forget those moments of just your leadership in this city. And even before we launched, I don't even know if you remember this. Hurricane Irma had hit 2017. Yeah. So that was right before us starting.
That's right.
Our interest social gets canceled, everything's destroyed, and you were putting on a service event, and you're like, Rich, bring the launch team, and we partnered with you, and we're able to serve our city along with Calvary. And so those moments were beautiful, and we still have photos and videos of all those times. But thank you for being who you are. Like, you know what I mean? You're always there for the little guy. You're always there championing the local church. And I'll never forget that, especially that COVID time, your consistent texts, prayers, support. It was amazing, man.
Oh, dude,
so thank you. Thank you, man.
You said something a little while ago that I want to talk really quick about. You said all these moments are trust moments of God saying, can I trust you with this? And I think you're an example of that. Not only, I think God started seeing you and raising you up and seeing the way that you handled everything. So you start serving in your local church. Let's go back to 16, 15. I can trust you to be a door holder. I can trust you to be an armor bearer. And you did everything, never wanting anything else, as far as like there was like no unhealthy ambition of like, but I want another guy's position. You always did things, and it's the way you've always carried yourself with a whole lot of humility. You're incredible at that. You'll take whatever the Lord gives you, and you're believing for more and all that. But you steward everything so good, and then you became a youth pastor,
right?
And you not in the easiest of situations at times, but even that you handled well. And I think this is something I think that, and it's crazy because now we're getting older. We got to teach the next generation. It's amazing. It's like how to be trusted with the things that God gives you, even if they're not everything that's in the bottom of your heart. Because all of us can have dreams and desires and goals. Yeah. But it's like, I'm here now. And if you're not careful, you'll despise the now thinking of the then.
That's so good.
And so I think you did such a good job of never despising moments, places, people. And I think that's why God is trusting you with so much now.
Amen. That's awesome. And I believe that even now, and we'll talk a little bit more about COVID in that season, but we're a 6-year-old portable church.
Yeah.
While yet believing God for permanency and a place, but you got to hold both in the same hands, right? So it's like, you can't just despise the school that we're in, despise the season we're in. Man, it's a beautiful God-given place. So you hold it in a hand of gratitude while yet holding in the other hand, faith for tomorrow.
Yes.
And it's both. It's just gratitude and humility.
Great.
I think ultimately it comes down to the fear of God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember I served everywhere. I mean, I was parking cars. I worked in the library of the church, just mixing the CDs of the messages, selling them. I did that for about 2-3 years. It was like my little thing, But I remember everything that the Lord would trust me with. It was just his fear of God, you know. And to this day, I want to keep growing in the fear of the Lord.
That's right.
I want to keep growing in everything. It's never mine. It's always his. And even with my children, with my wife, the things he's entrusting me with, I think that's something that I'm very aware of.
Yeah.
And I never take for granted, but I also want to continue to grow,
Yeah. I think I talked about this in season 1. I'm not sure, but I know I talked about it in the leadership thing that I did not long ago. But I was going through an old picture. I found I don't know if you remember back in the day, everybody had a photo bucket where you would store pictures.
Yes.
So I was going through my photo bucket a couple of years ago. Is where we would get all the pictures from MySpace and all that.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of pictures there of when I was serving. And one of them is me holding a towel, a water bottle, and a Bible for the pastor that I was with. And I just think if we're not careful, this generation, and even us now, we always got to remember patience, what it is to serve, what it is to wait on the Lord. I never had any unhealthy ambition. I don't think so back then. It was just literally like, I'm grateful. And I always want to remain grateful. I love how you do the two-hand example. It's like, I want to be grateful with all that we have. Yes, we have good spiritual ambition. J. Oswald Sanders talks about it's good to have spiritual ambition and make sure it's not unhealthy. But yeah, you dream and all that. But I want to steward this where I'm at with so much gratitude, fear of the Lord. It's like, God, there's people around the world that wish they had what we had, even though sometimes we could be like, man, I wish I had more. Right. Like we have more than enough already.
Isn't that something? Yeah. And it's like, for example, I mean, maybe you're not in ministry and you're listening to this. It's the source of your joy, right? I remember when we bought our first home, man, I was thinking, God, we have a house and you provided. I don't even know how it's possible. You live in it for a few years and now it's something else. Or the bigger house, right?
So true.
So what happens is that when you live in that pattern, the next thing is your source of joy.
Yeah.
And God never intended for the next bigger thing, better thing to be your source of joy. Can you be content with what you have right now?
Great.
While yet also thanking God for tomorrow.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be, distinct. It can be both and, right? And so in ministry, I just think of it like that. Lord, I'm so thankful that I have this. What a dream I'm living.
Yes.
You imagine somebody telling us 20 years ago
Never
that we'd be here?
It. Never would have imagined it.
Never, you know? And we can't take that for granted, how God is using us, his hand, his faithfulness, his provision. And in that time of COVID, it was so evident. We didn't have a Sunday morning gathering for 21 months, right? So we went online for 9 months.
Yeah,
and then
we were at a middle school. So here are the schools in Miami-Dade County didn't
got
let us
shut
go
down
back
for
a
real,
long time.
for real. And so we did 9 months online, and then my good friends, my Presbyterian friends here in our city at Granada Church.
You started using Granada. Was it in the afternoons?
It was in the evenings.
Yes,
man.
that's right.
Crazy. And so they were like, hey, you can use our facility.
Wow.
And we started having Sunday night gatherings in a building that's really 5 minutes from our school. So it kind of works out geographically. And we did that for another 9 to 10 months until the schools opened up and we were able to have Sunday morning church again. But it was a whole different church at that time, similar to all of us, whether you had a building or not. But it was almost like we had like a restart period at our church, And so here we are. But all those moments, man, all those months, all those years, we didn't even survive COVID. I tell this to everybody, we didn't survive it. We thrived.
Yes, absolutely.
Shout out to this podcast.
Thank you for that.
We thrived in that season. I mean, and I mean that, like, finances grew. We hired.
During COVID. Yeah, wild. Only God.
Like, you can't make that up. You know what I mean? We're not even having church services. We're hiring. We found innovative ways to serve our city with Easter in a box, Christmas in a box, and taking it to pictures. Channel 7 covered some of that stuff. It was just like just God strategies. And those are the moments you have to stop and say, okay, you're in it.
Yep. 100%.
You're in it, Lord.
Yep.
You're in front of us because this is not us.
That's right.
And I love those moments because it reminds us that it was never about us.
That's right.
And it will never be about us.
Yeah. And I think, I'm just having this thought now, all that ties back, and I think why the Lord keeps blessing you and Tina, your daughters, your church, generation, go all the way back to the beginning.
Amen.
It's because you never despised anything. And when you have that kind of attitude, if you struggle serving at a local church when you're not known, nobody knows your name, and you're content there. And you're not content there. You're never going to be content with anything else.
Absolutely.
Because something's always going to go wrong. The problem's always. We have a enemy that's walking around like a prowling lion, and it's like people look at ministry or can look at ministries like ours, which it's still not. There's some ministries that are absolutely global, and it can be like, oh, but look at them. And it's like, you have no idea the battles that we face week in, week out. And it's like, if you are not content with here, you're not going to be content here either.
Absolutely. And I think it's even harder now for the younger guys. And I know we're aging ourselves now, right?
Yeah.
With the social media stuff. I mean, we grew up in an era where that wasn't even a thing. That's but now it's the comparison side of it, And, how is that guy so much further than I am, right? In his promotion or his whatever, or her whatever.
Which, by the way, I think you told me you do it, but at times for me, I still struggle with that. So I have to just turn it off.
Yeah, and we talk about that. Yeah. I know you have moments where you're completely off of it because it's healthy, right? Because what does Craig Rochelle say? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're out here in Coral Gables. We baptized, 30 people, great. And you look online, somebody's baptizing 30,
Rick Warren, 30,000
and you're despising what God is doing.
So true.
But
there were Sundays where we would have such like an incredible Sunday. Some Sundays you walk away like, oh man, these little things, whatever. But there were some Sundays where it was a win. You're just like, man, today was awesome. What a phenomenal day. And then you scroll Sunday night and you're like, I suck.
Sunday nights can be the worst.
Yeah, like, why am I preaching? Why am I teaching? What are we doing? We're not doing nothing.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, man, I was falling into that. Especially, 5 years ago. Man, it is so difficult. And so you have these times where we just get away from it. You do the same thing.
Yeah, I live with that practice. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I'm a very competitive person by nature. I'm trying.
Come from a baseball background, athlete. Let's go.
And so I know myself. So I'm off that because I'm I want to stay true to what God is trusting me with. Not that of course we want to grow. Yeah. You know what I mean? Heaven and hell are realities. We're gonna grow. The church is meant to grow. God is doing amazing things, but everybody has a different grace.
Yes.
Everybody's got a different assignment, a different, a lane to run in. And so anybody listening to this that is thinking about their next moment, whatever God is prompting them to do, all of us have a grace.
Yes.
divine enablement to do what we're called to do. But you got to be able to stay humble and serve another man's dream. I mean, Joseph was called
That's right.
and served another man's dream for 15 years.
Very good.
15 years. Alex said, we can't even comprehend that right now, serving somebody else, right? And we did that, and not to say we did it perfect or we had it all right, but there was this level of like, can I serve?
That's right.
And can I lay my dream down and let God resurrect it in a healthy way?
100%. As we're getting ready to wrap this up, I want to ask you, because both of us come from very similar backgrounds, very similar circle of friends and all that. And like I said at the beginning, one of the things I've always admired about you is you've been consistent with the Lord, consistent in what God wanted to do in your life still to this day. What made you not look to the left or to the right or be caught up with like, I'm done with church, I'm done with God or whatever? What's made you, helped you stay consistent no matter what? Through early youth group days, through unhealthy church, through unhealthy, college experiences or whatever, through hurt, through pain, through COVID, through launching and things not working out. All of that, what helped you stay the course?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I would say early on, you're a part of a great church, great ministry, great things are happening. It's easy to kind of just fall into that rhythm of emotionalism, things, events. You're just kind of like a product of the calendar and what's happening. But it wasn't to that moment where I went away and I truly just tried to discover who Jesus is for myself. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds broad, but it was like I had a moment where I was just wrestling with my faith as to what I'm seeing, what I'm around is not doing it for me. Mm-hmm. And so I had to go deep into who the person of Jesus is for me. Wow. And I think just that pursuit really just kind of helped me stay grounded in I'm not in it for the fame, I'm not in it for the thing or the big events, the dopamine hits through the events that come with it. And I just really started being an apprentice of Jesus. And I truly mean that. And I think from there, I made a decision to say, I'm going to fear God no matter what. And it wasn't like a decision like I'm going to do it. It was just in me. And I was like, I'm going to grow in it. I'm going to lean into that. Yeah. And I just think the fear of the Lord has kept me grounded, man. Yeah. I never take myself too serious. And I'm not even trying to say that in a boastful way. I'm just getting to a place where like, Rich, you're Rich Romero. You're a Chico from Westchester. You know what I mean? God's using you, but it can never become about you. And I think the greatest lesson that I learned was from one of my overseers, Jedediah. And he always said, Rich, you got to redefine success. And this has stayed true with me for a decade. And what is success? And I had to redefine it. For me, success is hearing and obeying.
Wow.
Hearing and obeying. It's not the results because they're not on me.
That's right.
The expectations are not on me. The outcomes aren't on me. That's the Lord's to do. But success is that I heard and I obeyed in everything, not just with the church or with ministry, in all things. And I think that's just a good framing, thing for me as to like, hey, if it becomes something great, if it gets big, great. If not, great. I heard and I obeyed God. And so I think the fear of the Lord with redefining success has really helped me stay grounded.
That is awesome. I absolutely love that. And again, my prayer through this is to help anybody in any kind of leadership position, whether they're in ministry or not. And what you just said, hear and obey, whether it's just you're a stay-at-home mom,
that's right,
a husband trying to start up a business, or you're the CEO of a massive company, or you are another pastor. That is gold.
That's it. And that applies to all of it.
Yes. Dude, I love you.
I love you, man.
Appreciate you. I'm grateful that we get to do this in the city together.
Come
on. I call you a brother, and thank you for always being there for me and Diana as well, and Calvary, and excited for all that God is just getting started with you and Teen and Generations. I can't wait to see that all that God is doing. So I love you. Thank you for being.
I love you, man. Podcast. Honored to be here. Let's finish well.
Yes,
in
sir.
the city that God
Jesus'
called us to, man.
That's right.
Love you guys.
Love you too. Thank you for being with us. Remember, if you change yourself, you can change your world. Let's go.